Baldur's Gate 3. Us PC users have had it for about a month now, but you PS5 users are just getting your hands on it now. Good job on the wait, and if you have managed to avoid spoilers up to this point, congratulations. I promise you will not be spoiled here. We're just going to talk about how the game feels on PS5, what the actual gameplay of Baldur's Gate 3 is, and what choices you should be making in character creation when starting your adventure. Well, let's begin. Most of the gameplay you've probably seen is of the keyboard and mouse user interface, and there's a lot of buttons you can hit, and it's all on the bottom screen. There's no way that you can make that work on a controller, right? Well, they don't try to make it work on a controller. Instead, they use a totally different UI and a wedge system where you open up menus and you pick between the circles, which are usually like your main actions, your spells, your other actions, and then you use your joystick to pick what you want to pick. And I can say playing on a controller is functional. And I don't mean that in a bad way, I just mean that the option wheel works as a controller. It's fairly intuitive to use. My only gripe is that sometimes spells or actions will move around from where they were before. Like, they don't stay in the same spot in the option wheel, especially if you pick up new items or you get new spells as you go on your adventure. It tends to not stay in the same place, so you open up the menu and you think you're using Fireball, but then you click on Firebolt and you have to go back and reset it. It only happened a couple times. Normally I could tell, but taking advantage of the custom wheel where you choose everything you go is a total game changer, and I definitely recommend doing that because I didn't bother doing that for a while and it definitely got annoying. So take advantage of that custom wheel. Now, if you've been watching this game, Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't play like most RPGs that a regular person might be used to. It doesn't play like Skyrim or Oblivion or Elden Ring or The Witcher. It's based off of the 5th edition rules of Dungeons & Dragons, so if you don't have a lot of experience in the tabletop role-playing or just the combat role-playing genre in general, let me give you a brief explanation of how this works. If you already know what you're getting yourself into, there should be a time code on the screen to move on to the next section. Baldur's Gate 3 is a traditional dice-based RPG, meaning that you have ability scores like strength, dexterity, intelligence, and charisma, which determine your skills like athletics, strength, persuasion. When trying to do any of these, you'll be prompted to roll digital dice, which will add up your modifiers, and if your total is equal to or higher than the number shown here, you have succeeded in whatever you were trying to do. You have many classes to choose from, as well as you get 3 additional party members to travel with you on your adventures. It's important to consider a character's role in the party and take advantage of that. Barbarians and fighters tend to be tanks who will hang at the front of combat. Wizards and rogues may tend to hang in the back and do their fighting from a distance, avoiding getting attacked. Classes also get subclasses at 3rd level, which help you more uniquely define that character's role on the battlefield. It's also important to know how spellcasting works in this game, because it's not a typical video game RPG spellcasting system. There's no mana pool that recharges as you wait, but rather spell slots. Each of these classes get access to spellcasting immediately, and each of these classes get access through spells based off of choosing the right subclass at 3rd level. Your character's level will determine what spells you have access to. The higher the spell level, the more powerful the spell. Note that spell level and character level are different things, and spell levels are unlocked slower than player levels. For example, when you reach your max character level of level 12, you will have reached your max spell level of level 6. Any leveled spell can only be cast a certain amount of times before you need to have a long rest. The amount of times you can cast leveled spells is determined here, and cantrips can be cast indefinitely, but are much weaker than leveled spells. It's also worth pointing out that if you run out of lower leveled spell slots, you can still use them, but it will cost a higher level slot. Some spells even get more powerful if they're cast at a higher level than their starting level. This might sound all complicated and intimidating, but trust me, I've watched live streams of people playing this game with no D&D or RPG background, and it didn't take long for them to get the basics, and be able to understand playing. But you still might be worried about the game's difficulty. Some people online say it's really easy, others say it's impossibly hard. As someone who's currently playing on the hardest difficulty, I'll tell you that the people who say the game is too easy are liars. Well, not exactly. If you explore every nook and cranny, do every quest, and optimize your build, the game is pretty manageable after level 4. But if you're the type of person watching this video looking for advice, there's a pretty good chance you won't know what the optimizing strategies are on your first playthrough. Even as someone who's played a lot of 5e, I kind of made choices in the game about my character party and my main character that screwed me over later into the game, especially as I kind of forgot to do any of the non-main direct main quest stuff in Act 2, and that royally screwed me over going into Act 3. Take my advice, start on balanced difficulty, explore the game, do everything you can, talk to all the people, get as much out of the game as you can, and if the experience points you've collected isn't enough and you're having to quick save every half a turn, lower the difficulty. On my first playthrough, I unknowingly skipped a huge section of the second act of the game, and by the time I had realized, I had no way of going back and doing that extra stuff. I had blocked myself off to a huge part of the game, and then going into Act 3, I was severely underleveled, and I was quick saving basically every other action in combat to the point where I wasn't having fun anymore. However, once I lowered the difficulty, then I was finally able to enjoy the game again, finishing off and having a good time. Even by the end, I had done enough side stuff, I had caught up with leveling, and I was able to bring the difficulty back up to balanced for the final part of the game. This game is about having fun, and if the difficulty is making the game less fun for you, you can make the game easier. The same goes the other way. If you're finding the game too easy and you want more of a challenge, raise the difficulty. Speaking of quick saving though, you're gonna want to do that pretty often. The PC version of this game only autosaves once every time you rest at camp, and when you enter new areas, you can go about 30 minutes or more without an autosave, so I recommend at the start of every combat, or right before an important dialogue, autosave. If you can, save before you enter combat in case you find it too tough and you have to retreat and go back and get more leveling or items. Some dialogue can also end with fights that are basically unwinnable if you do it too badly, so there's another reason to keep quick saves going. The game will store multiple quick saves for you, so you don't need to worry about saving over your last quick save and now being stuck at a point where the game is unwinnable. Now, you might feel ready to start the game. You're gonna open up the game, go to new game, and start making your character. Very quickly, you'll be faced with multiple class options and multiple race options, and now you might be thinking, what's the best thing to do here? There's no real wrong answers here. Your racial abilities are rarely so powerful that they have any major effect on character build, but some will complement certain playstyles over others. The most important thing is always to play what you think you'd have the most fun playing. Classes can also be respec'd later, so if you feel like you've made a mistake, you can fix it later on. However, there are some classes that are more likely to leave you with a more enjoyable experience. Let me explain. This game has lots of dice rolls. Not all of them are in combat. You're going to be rolling lots of charisma checks throughout the game, and even though you could also use a companion to do the talking in the game, I assume you mainly want to be in control of the character you created when going into dialogues or charging into dungeons. This means that you're going to want to play a character with high charisma who can handle all of those conversations. The classes that benefit from a high charisma are Bard, Paladin, Sorcerer, and Warlock. So let's do a quick overview of these guys to see who might be good for a first playthrough. The Warlock can do really high damage but has very few resources. You're a spellcaster with few spell slots and a martial character without martial abilities. Now, the Warlock isn't bad in any way. In fact, my Warlock has been a crucial part of my party during Act 1. But I feel like the Warlock doesn't do a great job of teaching you how the other classes work. So unless you're interested in just trying one, I'd recommend looking into other options. Sorcerers are pure spellcasters, and they have the ability to maximize their magic to do more damage, protect allies from AoE spells, and more. My first character in Baldur's Gate 3 was actually a sorcerer, and they're a ton of fun, especially in the late game when they have very high level spellcasting and can do a ton of crazy stuff. The only issue I had with the sorcerer was character placement. Sorcerers are very easy to hit. In a battle, you want them in the back where they can take out enemies from a distance. However, if you mainly control your character and have them lead conversations like I did, they'll be front lines when the battle starts. Luckily, the sorcerer's charisma is so high that you should be able to talk your way out of most encounters, but the fights you do get into will leave you starting at a disadvantage. If you want to experience full spellcasting and are willing to find solutions to your sorcerer's weaknesses, they can be a very fun first playthrough. Paladin. What to say about Paladin? Paladin is a great character to start with. They have high strength and charisma, which means their inventory management matters a lot less. You have the charisma to talk your way out of fights, the defense to be in the front lines, and the damage to bite back. My second playthrough has been on Paladin on the hardest difficulty, and man is it fun. However, nothing is perfect. I'll give my 2 gripes about this class. Firstly, you have very little to no options for crowd control, the same as for ranged combat. The Paladin excels when they got a sword in one hand and an enemy in front of them, but they will have to be pushing forward in order to be doing their damage. The other issue is their oath. Every Paladin takes an oath, in agreement to follow a certain way of life. If you don't follow this code, you lose your oath's powers, and going down the track of becoming an oath breaker. This basically means that the punishment for making a choice the game doesn't want you to will be losing your subclass and having to take a new one. Now, I haven't ran into any issues in my playthrough, but if you're thinking of playing a morally gray character, either go Vengeance Paladin or maybe pick a different class. Bard. Bard is a great class for first-time players. Bards are the jack of all trades. They can use fighting styles, spellcasting, healing, and lots of different skills. Bards get to dip their hand into every part of the game's mechanics while still being a strong, viable member of the party. This is actually why I was really close to making the Bard my first character for my first playthrough. Even if you're unsure if you want to be a Bard for the whole playthrough, by picking Bard, you can see what kind of playstyle you naturally lead to, then easily respec to a class that better fits that playstyle, plus the high charisma, bonus skills, proficiencies, and the other ways Bards can boost their skills means you'll rarely be failing skill checks. And that just means you get to experience a lot more of what the game has to offer. If Bard is of any interest to you, I recommend giving it your go first time around. Plus, if you just like being a Bard, the Bard has many subclasses that really let you narrow into what part of being a Bard you like, whether it be skills, sword fighting, or spellcasting. Now, I feel like you're ready to get the most that you can out of Baldur's Gate 3. Remember, advice is just advice, and don't let anyone talk you out of having your own fun in the game. Now, if you end up enjoying the game and think you might want to get into D&D, I have a playlist of videos made just for people new to the game. Those videos are kind of a few months old, which doesn't sound like a lot, but my channel's also only a few months old, so that was just when I was starting to do YouTube, so they're weaker than the videos that I make now, but they're there if you're interested. Anyway, thank you for watching. This is the end of the video.